Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
I always checked my bank app first thing in the morning. It was a ritual, my phone buzzing on the nightstand, my fingers fumbling through the crackle of sleep until I found the icon. Some people read the news or scroll through social media. I watched numbers update. It was comforting, a small reassurance that my world was intact. That Monday, I was half-dressed, standing in the bathroom doorway with a travel mug of coffee in one hand and a shirt sleeve dangled off my shoulder in the other. The shower steam curled behind me like a curtain. I tapped the app and waited for it to load, expecting the familiar red and green of debits and credits, the routine calculus of my salary being spent and replenished in its predictable cycle. What I saw instead made the mug tremble in my grasp. $75,000. $75,000 gone. My jaw dropped, coffee sloshing over the rim. My heart jolted, and my chest felt hollow. Like I had exhaled every reassuring breath I'd taken that morning. I stared at the list of transactions, incredulous, several entries, each labeled in sleek, impersonal font. Luxury flights, boutique hotel, gourmet dinner, and one cryptic line, private SAR service. The only thing missing was a name. There was no description hinting at who had booked these extravagances. I didn't order a flight to Paris. I didn't dine at an exclusive Rome restaurant. I certainly didn't hire a driver around Geneva in the dead of night. And Ivy, my wife, she was away, or so she'd told me. She said she'd been summoned to Chicago for a sudden conference, a routine client visit. Chicago was gutsy, but the flights I saw were transatlantic. Only one of us could be surprised, and I felt like I'd been sucker punched. My breath hitched. I nearly dropped my mug. I shut off the faucet and leaned against the marble counter, my reflection swimming in the mirror behind me. My eyes were wide, unblinking, as if I expected the numbers to morph back to normal if I stared long enough. A single drop of coffee smudged my reflection's chin. I swallowed hard. This wasn't a bug or a glitch. This was deliberate. $75,000 didn't vanish due to a software hiccup. It evaporated because someone authorized it. Someone with access to my account. Someone like Ivy. I didn't call the bank. Not yet. My adrenaline roared, boiling past panic into a pheromone of cold control. I closed the app and navigated to our shared location sharing application. My thumb swiped open our map, and I held the phone steady as I watched the little blue dot representing Ivy's phone appear in Chicago, or so I thought. My pulse rattled against my ribs while I confirmed she'd used that same map to assure me she'd be home Wednesday morning. But there she was, stationary in Chicago time? No. I zoomed out. The dot sat over the Atlantic. I panned slightly east, and the city label shifted. Paris. The Eiffel Tower icon peeked from behind the ocean line. A plane icon moved slowly toward the French mainland. I swallowed bile. My wife wasn't in Chicago. My wife was halfway across the world. My mind danced through possibilities, each more unforgiving than the last. Could Ivy be staged somewhere, forced into fraudulent spending? Unlikely. Could someone else have my credentials? Maybe, but why funnel luxury expenses to her device? It was too neat. She was complicit. I pressed my lips together and forced calm. I could feel my heart thunder in my throat, but I didn't let it roar. Not yet. I would gather evidence. I would maintain clarity. First, find out exactly where she was going. I tapped the flight tracking app. The interface crawled as it updated. Tangled codes unraveled into a flight number. Air France. Flight 67. Departure from JFK at midnight. Arrival scheduled for 1 a.m. Central European Time. I traced her progress as if I were a surveillance operative, not a husband. At 35,000 feet, she'd be airborne for 7 hours. She had time. I had time. I needed a plan. I set the phone on the counter and watched the creamy coffee pool at my feet. My bathroom floor was tiled in white, and the dark stain grew until it resembled spilled blood. I grabbed a towel and mopped at it, but the sensation of watching my money vanish wasn't something a rag could absorb. Not today. I dried my hands deliberately, ignoring the slight tremor. I walked into the bedroom and retrieved her suitcase from under the bed. It was locked, but any half-decent lock could be circumvented. I didn't need to rummage. I only needed her boarding pass, or whatever physical proof of her lie I could find, to bolster what my bank call would uncover. With her suitcase in tow, I hurried downstairs, my headset in one ear playing a muted news podcast, my laptop balanced in my free hand. Once I reached my home office, I dropped her bag on the desk and booted up the computer. I opened a fresh browser window and navigated to our joint airline account. My credentials. Everything was there. A record of her booking, the passenger manifest, and I swallowed at the sight. 2 tickets. One in her name, and another in a name I didn't recognize, Julian Marks. My blood chilled, and the hairs on my arms prickled. Julian Marks, he was no business associate. No client. I'd met him once at a fundraiser. Ivy had mentioned his name in passing, a gym buddy who shared her spin class. I'd assumed it was innocent banter, nothing more than friendship. Now, under that innocuous label, I saw the outlines of deception. A hot flicker of bitterness ignited inside me. My wife spent our savings on him. She had lied to me for weeks. What else was she keeping? I didn't call to scream. I didn't shout accusations into the phone. Instead, I clicked the tab for my bank's customer service line. I appeared calm, deliberate. The call connected, and a sterile voice asked how they could help. I said, "I'd like to report unauthorized transactions on my account." I spoke slowly, articulating each word. "Yes, I'll hold." The empathy in the agent's voice was canned but sufficient. She paused to verify my identity, then asked if I wanted to freeze the card. We were in sync before I'd said much. I said, immediately. I clicked back to the flight tracker and monitored the plane's progress. Paris lay just ahead. Ivy, unaware, was flying into the jaws of her own betrayal. I took a slow breath, feeling an odd serenity wash over the raging tempest inside. The bank agent's voice returned. "Your cards will be locked within minutes. You'll receive confirmation via text." I thanked her and ended the call. My gaze flicked to the window. Dawn was breaking, light painting the city skyline in pastel hues. This morning routine, check the bank app, check the news, pack a lunch, had handed me a loaded match. Betrayal burned, but it didn't scorch me. It illuminated the decay that lay hidden beneath a veneer of trust. My hand hovered over the mouse, ready to watch the smoke rise as I set fire to every lie she'd built. And I was just getting started. I watched Ivy's flight like a terminal screen flickering over the Atlantic, the little jet icon inching eastward until it passed the Irish coastline and crossed into the gray of the channel. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't notice. The living room light cast a pale glow over my laptop screen, illuminating the flight tracker's progress bar as if it were a timeline of her betrayal. Each tick forward was a revelation, confirming that everything she'd whispered about business and networking was a lie. Chicago was a lie. The boarded plane to Paris was the truth. I felt the hard edge of reckoning sharpen in my gut. I opened our shared airline account, fingers curling around the mouse as I scrolled through the details. There it was, stark and undeniable. 2 first-class tickets on an overnight flight. One was reserved for my wife, Ivy Carter. The other was for someone named Julian Marks. My throat tightened at the name. I had seen him once at a charity gala. Sharp tuxedo, smooth confidence, and a gaze that lingered on Ivy's laughter longer than courtesy demanded. Jim Buddy, she'd called him, back when we were building that house together, when our dreams were aligned like furniture plans drawn in charcoal pencil. Now, his name shimmered on the screen like a neon sign. Accomplice, interloper, usurper. The plane had left New York's tarmac 4 hours ago. Now it soared above the ocean, cutting across time zones and drawing her farther from everything we had built. I traced its path until the tracker marked its descent toward Charles de Gaulle. Her calculated deceit had a timetable, and I refused to let her script the ending. I opened a new tab and typed Air France customer service, prepared to confirm that once she reached Paris, he would find no easy way to continue this charade. But first, I collected evidence. I clicked on the itinerary PDF, downloaded it, and saved it in a folder labeled Evidence, Ivy. There was something deeply satisfying about compressing her betrayal into a neat subfolder on my desktop, as if digital organization could tether her misdeeds to something tangible. My phone buzzed with a bank notification. Your card has been locked due to suspicious activity. A small victory, but I felt no triumph. Instead, I sensed that our marriage was as weightless as that jet above, drifting beyond reach. I closed the notification with a swipe and opened the flight tracking app on my phone as well. It showed altitude, speed, estimated arrival, data points that now felt personal. I imagined her in that cabin, the soft hum of engines vibrating through the seats, the gentle dimming of cabin lights. Somewhere in the darkness, she was with him sharing champagne, brushing shoulders, whispering words that had once been reserved for me. My chest constricted at the thought. I recalled the morning she left, the careful way she'd zipped her suitcase, the practiced kiss on my cheek. She'd called it business casual, a wink and a smile that disguised the truth. She'd promised to send photos of her meetings in the loop, her voice bright despite the early hour. I'd wished her luck, watched her retrieve her briefcase before hugging her goodbye. Be safe, I'd said. Drive carefully. She'd laughed and told me not to worry. Now, I understood drive carefully was never about roads. It was a red herring leading away from this abyss. Everything she said disguised itself as normalcy, cloaking the sharp edges of deceit. I minimized the airline tab and opened our shared messaging app. We had a group chat with close friends, work colleagues, neighbors, the occasional cousin, and surely, she would message me from the airport lounge in Chicago, delighted by some small perk or new acquaintance. Instead, I saw nothing. No, I'm here. No, can't wait for dinner Wednesday. No hint of her existence except the lifeless dot on the map. That absence was deafening. It echoed in the empty chat window and in the hollow space beside me on the couch, where her warmth used to settle like a tether to home. The plane was scheduled to land in 30 minutes. I pushed back from the desk and stood, pacing the length of the room. My shoes scuffed softly on the hardwood floors. I considered going to the office to distract myself with spreadsheets, presentations, meaningless meetings, but the thought of sitting among colleagues who believed I was oblivious felt unbearable. I needed to stand here, watch time press forward, and mark every minute as another confession of her duplicity. Her altitude chart showed the curve of her path, climbing, descending, rising toward revelation. My phone buzzed again, this time with an in-flight entertainment suggestion from Air France's app, Explore Paris from 35,000 feet. I opened it impulsively, browsing virtual tours of Montmartre and the Louvre, descriptions of golden facades and candlelit dinners at La Tour d'Argent. The irony made my stomach churn. I could almost taste the wine they'd share, feel the plush upholstery beneath them as they laughed at someone else's joke. I closed the app, hard hammering, and muted the notification sound. I would feel enough of this soon. I didn't need to prolong it. 45 minutes later, my phone dinged again with a location update. The dot had landed. The altitude read 0 feet. I refreshed. I wanted to see what terminal she'd appear at, which exit she'd stride from. Would she check a bag, step into the throng of taxis? Would she fumble for her phone and realize her map no longer showed my home? Would she open Tinder to find him next to her face? I watched, spellbound, as the map zoomed in, the pin dropping precisely at Terminal 2E. A text arrived from Ivy's number, but it appeared only as a blank message with an exclamation mark. I tapped to load, and the message unfurled. Card declined? What's happening? I stared at it, withdrawal of trust vibrating between us. The trifling panic in her words, the exasperation. She sounded like someone who'd simply misplaced a credit card. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the banking app and confirmed the freeze. There it was. All transactions declined. Beneath it, a message, please contact your bank. She had no idea what was coming, but I did. I switched back to the flight tracker and saw a new line appear. On foot, a small walking person icon shimmered near baggage claim. She was moving through the airport, probably toward customs, carefree, unaware she'd been cast out of my financial life. I paused before replying to her text, calibrated my next move. This was my awakening as much as hers. My realization that the woman I loved had been planning her escape, and my chance to respond not with hysteria, but with precision. I tapped out 2 words, call me. A single blue checkmark blinked beneath the unsent text, a silent witness to my fury and restraint. I locked my phone and slipped it into my pocket. The lights in the living room dimmed as clouds passed the unseen sun. Outside, dawn broke over our city without her. Inside, my world had shifted on its axis, and I stood ready for the reckoning, as icy and relentless as the flight path that brought her to her undoing. I sat back in my leather desk chair and watched the live feed of transaction declines cascade across my phone screen. Each red declined stamped next to a location was a confession of her desperation. 4 attempts at the Ritz in Paris, 3 more at an exclusive wine bar in Saint-Germain, 2 at a private chauffeur service that promised anonymity and discretion. My finger hovered over Ivy's latest text, which glowed at the top of the notifications. Why won't IT work? I need that car service. But I didn't respond. Instead, I exhaled slowly and opened the secure chat window for my bank's fraud department. There, Beneath the automated message that thanked me for my vigilance, a live agent popped online. Yes? How can I assist? She typed. I tapped each letter with purpose. Please confirm that all cards linked to my account have been frozen and that any pending charges are reversed. Her reply came in under 10 seconds. All cards have been locked. We're investigating unauthorized charges and will refund them after verification. Your identity has been confirmed. I considered sending a terse thank you, but I left the window open, silent, like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. My gaze shifted to the city view through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind my desk. Morning light filtered through gray clouds, reflecting off the river in dull shards. It looked peaceful, indifferent to the havoc unfolding across the ocean. I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the building's HVAC system, the only other sound in the otherwise silent apartment. Then my phone chimed again, another frantic message from Ivy. I'm freezing over here. Literally. They won't let me get a cab without a working card. I swallowed a laugh that felt more like acid. She'd never been stranded before. She'd always known I'd bail her out. This time, she couldn't call me. This time, she had to face consequences. I opened my laptop and pulled up a timeline of Ivy's recent activities. Her last geotag on social media, her recent calendar entries, the dashcam footage from the tuk-tuks she'd hailed during a networking event in Mumbai last year. I gathered tiny flecks of evidence, nothing out of the ordinary until you viewed it through the lens of betrayal. Each appointment, each check-in, each photo was a breadcrumb on a trail leading away from me. I scrolled until I found the transaction IDs for the Paris charges and copied them into an email draft addressed to my lawyer, Carson Reed. I added notes: potential financial infidelity, evidence of collusion, request to draft preliminary divorce proceedings. I attached a screenshot of the first-class itinerary and a clip of her laughing with Julian at the airport lounge. Satisfied, I hit send and watched the cursor spin. The email landed in his inbox with a quiet finality. FYI. More to follow. The bank agent's message flashed again. Thank you for your patience. Should we notify you when the investigation is concluded? I hesitated, then clicked yes. I needed the confirmation that the bank would communicate their findings directly to me, bypassing any possibility that Ivy might intercept a call or email from their fraud alert line. I felt a rare thrill of control surge through me. The tide had turned, and she was drifting without an oar, helpless in the current she had created. I rose and paced the length of the apartment, past the minimalist art Ivy had selected for our walls, black and white photographs of cityscapes, vibrant abstracts that once symbolized our joint aspirations. Now, each piece felt like a monument to her deceit. I traced a finger over the frame of one particular print, a blurred image of the Eiffel Tower seen through rain-speckled glass. It had been a gift from her last Valentine's trip to Paris with me. She'd kissed me beneath that tower's lights and spoken of renewal, of adventure, of us. Those words felt like sand slipping through my clenched fist, ephemeral and unreachable. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Ivy. It was a notification from our home security system, front door unlocked. I frowned. She shouldn't be back for hours. I opened the app and saw her profile icon idle at the front entrance. My pulse quickened. I tapped the lock door button, but before I could confirm, I saw the lock status switch, unlocked. Someone had a physical key. I clicked view camera and watched a grainy feed of our entry hall. A luggage trolley stood before the door, and Ivy's tall silhouette appeared. She must have returned on standby, or maybe she'd booked a last-minute red-eye on my corporate account, an account I hadn't yet frozen. She'd circumvented my freeze by using our company's corporate billing. My stomach turned sick at her resourcefulness. I watched her reach for her phone, likely texting me again, desperate for rescue. I reached for another device, our separate door code. I tapped it in, and a moment later the door clicked closed. Ivy's silhouette wavered in the camera. Then she turned, looked down at the trolley as if it had betrayed her, and trudged back up the hallway. I sat heavily in my chair, breath rattling in my chest. For the first time since I'd discovered her betrayal, I'd underestimated her. She'd found a loophole in the fortress I'd erected. Now she was untethered from Paris and back in my building, but still banned from my funds and from my trust. My phone chimed with another alert. Carson's assistant confirming receipt of my email. I typed a quick note. Proceed as discussed. Let's set up a meeting at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I hit send, already anticipating the crisp urgency of his response. Then I muted the phone and sat still, drained. The apartment was too quiet again, as if it, too, had held its breath during Ivy's brief intrusion. I craned my neck and peered out the window at the wake of office towers, all ablaze with early sunlight. I thought of Ivy walking the sterile corridors of our building, suitcase in tow, exposed. I thought of her weary steps and the panic beneath her calm veneer. I glanced back at the bank's freeze notification, still open on my second screen. It was a simple statement, devoid of emotion. Card frozen. Investigation in progress. But to me, it was an anthem of retribution. I sat upright, squared my shoulders, and closed the banking window. This freeze was more than a transaction hold. It was the first deliberate strike in a war for truth and justice. Ivy had lit this fire with her lies. I had the match. And now, the blaze would illuminate every hidden corner of our lives, every false touch and whispered excuse. I smiled, a slow, steady curve that tasted of resolve. She'd thought she could elude me at 35,000 feet. But the altitude had only given me a clearer view of the abyss she was falling into and the power I held to pull her down. My phone buzzed again, a muted tremor in the quiet of my apartment. I glanced at the screen and saw the bank's security alert. Transaction declined. Then another. Transaction declined. And another. Each alert was a tiny detonation, a syllable in the message I was crafting through my actions. I knew, and I was in control. Paris, Rome, Geneva, her secret playground was now cut off, one attempted purchase at a time. I watched the flickering notifications, each declined, a bead of sweat on Ivy's forehead somewhere above the Seine. It felt almost poetic. She thought she was untouchable at 35,000 feet. She didn't realize that distance only sharpened the edge of my retribution. I leaned back in my chair, phone in hand, and replayed her last text in my head. Hey, the card's not working. Can you call? This is urgent. The word urgent pulsed in my memory like a neon sign. But I wasn't rushing to her rescue. Not yet. I sipped the coffee I'd left cooling on the desk and savored its bitterness, matching the taste of victory on my tongue. My reflection in the dark screen was steely, unyielding. My world felt rebalanced. The predator had become the prey, and I was the one holding the net. A fifth alert chimed. Luxury lodging group. $1, 200, declined. I pictured Ivy at the front desk, waving her card with agitation, her brow knit in mounting panic. I could almost hear the concierge's polite regret. I'm sorry, madam, the card has been declined. The scene was vivid in my mind's eye, down to the polished marble floors and the discreet escort who would guide her to a corner payphone, if one still existed, or force her to scrounge for cash. All on my dime. Each denial was a revelation of her hubris, exposing the truth that had lurked beneath polite smiles and whispered promises. I opened the email app and saw the automated message waiting. Your card ending in 3427 has been declined due to a security freeze. If this was not you, please contact us immediately. The bank's professionalism was a stark contrast to the chaos I'd orchestrated. I hit archive, letting it drift into the ether of my inbox, along with any shred of doubt that I'd gone too far. I allowed myself a small smile, cold and precise, like a surgeon admiring a clean incision. She'd chosen this path when she drained our account for a flight she'd lied about. Now, she would feel every heartbeat of her error. My mind flicked to the moments before she'd left, how she kissed me goodbye with a squeeze that felt rehearsed, how her eyes avoided mine for a fraction too long. I chalked it up to a busy day ahead, to the stress of client meetings in Chicago. Now I knew those glances were part of an elaborate deception. She had been practicing her lies, framing her story to keep me complacent. And complacent I had been, until this morning's revelation. The bank's declined notifications were the drumbeat of justice, reminding me that ignorance was my greatest vulnerability and retaliation, my greatest clarity. I set my phone on the table and stood, stretching muscles tight from tension. I moved to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass and looking down at the city below. Traffic was beginning to stir, headlights navigating the honeycomb of streets as workers made their way to office towers. From here, the world looked serene, human bustle organized into neat lanes and signals. Yet somewhere across the ocean, Ivy was stranded in her own chaos, her carefully constructed life unraveling knot by knot. My vantage point might be thousands of miles away, but every collapse she experienced reverberated through me like thunder. My phone buzzed once more, another declined notification. This time, it was for La Petite Table à la Carte, an intimate bistro known for its discreet clientele. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, picturing her searching for another card, another solution, her fingers fumbling as she typed the wrong PIN or found no funds to order a single espresso. She would have to face the embarrassment of standing in line, explanation involuntary on her lips. "I'm so sorry. My card has been declined." Each moment of her discomfort filled me with a cold satisfaction I'd never anticipated. The roles had reversed. She was the one gasping for breath, while I sat calm in my sanctum, guiding the narrative. Then, unexpectedly, a new email arrived, a summary of attempted charges. It listed every merchant, every timestamp, every location. I opened it, scanning the details like a detective examining crime scene photos. The list was exhaustive. Luxury boutiques in the Marais, a rooftop bar near the Louvre, a helicopter tour booking. Yes, she'd even tried to charter a helicopter. My pulse quickened. She was escalating, desperate to salvage something. I minimized the window and opened the banking app again, this time tapping unfreeze for essential transactions. My thumb hovered. Did I want her to have enough funds to get home? Or did I want her to remain stranded until she faced the full weight of her actions? I chose the latter. I exited without reactivating a single card. At that moment, my phone screen went dark, no new notifications. Silence surged, a vacuum after the storm of declines. I realized Ivy had exhausted her attempts, beaten back at every turn. She was powerless. The realization struck me like ice water. I held not just her finances, but her freedom. I could bring her home on a dime, or consign her to wander Europe in humiliation. It was my choice. And choice was a luxury I intended to savor. I sank back into my chair and retrieved the burner phone I'd bought last year for emergencies. I'd never used it until now. I punched in Ivy's Paris number and waited as the line rang. No answer. I tried again and again until the call went to voicemail. I left a simple message. "Your card has been declined. I won't unlock it until you're back home. Safe travels." I didn't mention Jean-Paul's. I didn't mention Julian. I didn't mention the banker's freezing actions or the images I'd already sent Talia Marks. Those would emerge in due time. For now, my message was concise, chilling in its brevity. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the couch. I reached for my tablet and opened the itinerary once more. I blocked out Julian's name. He'd find out soon too, though. I'd copied evidence to his fiancée, and her anger would be a second blow. I considered forwarding the itinerary to the concierge at Ivy's hotel with a note. Request immediate cancellation of this room. Unauthorized guest. But I paused. I wanted her to hit her own walls, to feel the sting of her arrogance when the manager, polite and indifferent, told her there'd be no exceptions. I'd given her the map. Now she needed to navigate the fallout alone. I leaned forward and dialed my lawyer, Carson Reed. His assistant answered. "Carson's with a client. Should I tell him it's urgent?" "Yes," I said. "Tell him to call me back immediately." I hung up and sat in the gathering dusk, watching the unspectacular glow of streetlights flicker on. The world outside was moving at its routine pace, lunch breaks, coffee runs, casual chatter in cafes. But inside my sphere, a reckoning was unfolding, measured by the declines on a screen and the echo of an unspoken message. Betrayal has a cost. I closed my eyes and let the tension loosen, knowing that soon I would hear from Carson, and we would begin dismantling the final structure of our marriage, one careful step at a time. Until then, the freeze was in place, and Ivy's world had reduced to those two words flashing on her screen. Declined. 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 The text arrived while I was sipping a late afternoon espresso, its tone frantic and clipped. "Okay. What's going on? I'm kinda stuck here." For a moment, I allowed a small, cold smile to form. Stuck. Stranded. That single word encapsulated every nuance of her betrayal. She'd assumed that money, my money, would always be there to cushion her lies. But today, she was learning that luxury was a veneer, and beneath it lay the hard reality of consequence. I set down my cup and stared at the glowing screen, relishing the moment before I replied. Paris in spring was alive with possibility, but for Ivy, it had transformed into a gilded cage. I pictured her walking through the grand lobby of the Hotel Ritz, her heels clicking against marble floors, only to be met by polite indifference when she presented her card. I imagined the concierge's practiced regret, the way his shoulders would slump ever so slightly, an apology poised on his lips but silenced by policy. She would have scoured her purse for cash, only to find it shockingly absent. The city's invitation, chocolate croissants, sunlit walks along the Seine, had turned into a labyrinth with no exit. Another message popped up. Please tell me you didn't freeze the account. Her desperation bled through capital letters, exclamation points, and all-caps fury. I let it sit for a beat, the text floating in that liminal space between her panic and my reply. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as if conducting an orchestra, each note measured and precise. Finally, I typed, "Yes, I did. You misused our funds. I'll rotate access when you're on the next flight home." Then I hit send and closed my eyes, picturing her pulse quicken at those words. She texted back almost immediately, "You can't do this." I savored the righteous indignation in her tone. Watch me, I thought, though I left those words unspoken. Instead, I left the apartment and walked to the window, peering out at the cityscape. The buildings loomed silently, as if conspiring with me, indifferent to her plight. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. This was not aggression but defense. I was reclaiming power stolen from me. I paced the floor, devising the next moves in my carefully plotted dismantling of her world. I glanced at the clock. She had 12 hours before the hotel demanded payment or eviction. I tapped open her itinerary and checked for alternative plans, return flights, rental cars, meeting confirmations. Nothing. She'd planned only forward, not accounting for obstacles that required realignment. That oversight was her undoing. I opened a browser and searched flights from Paris to New York, hunting for the earliest standby ticket. I found one. Air France Flight 051, departing in 16 hours. I noted the price and availability, then forwarded the details to Ivy's email. Subject line, "Your options." The message contained a single line, "You'll pay for it." Then I archived the draft. Her reply stung more than I expected. "You're unreal. I thought we were partners." I tilted the phone and stared at her words. Partners. The irony was bitter. We had shared a life, a home, dreams of children, and anniversaries. Yet she had siphoned our savings to fund her escape. I let her belief in partnership linger for a heartbeat before replying. Partners respect trust. Then I locked the phone and set it face down. I didn't need to watch her type. The damage was done. I moved to the sofa and sank into its cushions, closing my eyes against the buzz of the city below. Memories of our early days flickered, impromptu picnics under the Eiffel Tower when we first honeymooned there, our laughter echoing against ancient stones. Those images felt surreal now, as if belonging to someone else's life. The betrayal had hollowed them, reduced them to relics of a time before her duplicity. I inhaled deeply and exhaled, letting go of nostalgia. This was my reality, a husband scorned, a marriage fractured, and an entire continent between us. My phone buzzed once more. A new email subject line from Air France detailing denied authorization for her flight upgrade. I opened it and saw the same declined stamp, $2,000 for business class, declined. An involuntary smirk crossed my face. She was resourceful, I admitted, but not resourceful enough. The only currency that could bail her out was goodwill, an asset she had utterly depleted. I stood and walked to my desk, retrieving the burner phone I'd used earlier. I dialed her number again, allowing it to ring until voicemail picked up. I left a final message. Your upgrade was declined too. Bring your bags to the lobby and take the shuttle back to CDG. The 6 a.m. flight is confirmed. I'll see you in New York. Then I hung up. Leaving the apartment felt momentous. I grabbed my keys and stepped outside, locking the door behind me. The hallway lights bathed me in a sterile glow as I descended the stairs. Each step felt like a heartbeat, deliberate and resolute. I imagined Ivy standing in that same hallway back in her hotel, billed as royal luxury, but no match for her undoing. I pictured her confusion turning to resignation as she realized I wasn't bargaining. This wasn't negotiation, it was a decree. I reached the lobby and exited into the street, where a cab rolled by. I waved it down and climbed in, offering my address. The driver nodded, and we pulled away. As the city blurred past the window, I felt a calm wash over me. The panic belonged to her now. She was the one grappling with uncertainty, forced to navigate consequences she'd once dismissed. My own world, though scarred, felt steady by action. I had drawn the line, and she would have to cross it to come home. When I arrived back at my apartment 2 hours later, I found a missed call from Ivy's number and a voicemail icon blinking. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice trembled. Please unlock the account. I'll do anything. Just let me pay you back." The plea, raw and unfiltered, echoed in the silent room. I listened until the beep, then deleted the message. I held the phone in my hand, contemplating mercy, but mercy would reverse the lesson. I placed it on the table and walked away. Tomorrow would bring new complications, refund timelines, legal counsel, emotional fallout. But tonight, I would rest in the satisfaction that Ivy's panic in Paris was complete and that her reckoning had only just begun. I found Julian's Instagram in under a minute. At least he hadn't hidden his face behind privacy settings or bizarre filters. There he stood, sun-splashed on a yacht deck, broad shoulders relaxed, the caption reading, "Making memories with the one who matters most." It was tagged with Ivy's name and a heart emoji. I frowned at the glossy image as if it were a photograph of a crime scene. His arm draped around her waist, her head tilted toward him, hair catching the sunlight. They both looked so indisputably happy. My pulse quickened with a cold fury. It was one thing to mistrust her words. It was another to witness the tangible evidence of her betrayal, broadcast for the world to see. I minimized the screen and pressed my thumb to my temple, tasting the acrid tang of effort as I fought the urge to smash my phone. Instead, I exhaled slowly and reopened the photo. He was tagged in the location as Paris, Le Bourget. A smaller font read Private Charter Lounge. My lips thinned. She wasn't merely vacationing with a friend. She'd arranged clandestine travel with him, in luxury reserved for the ultra-wealthy. I closed my eyes and leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me. Each time I thought I'd seen the limit of her deception, she revealed another layer. I opened the photo again and stared at it, as if by sheer will I could erase their smiles. Then I did something I didn't expect. I sent the image to Julian's fiancée, Talia Marks, from a burner account I'd set up months ago for emergencies. A satellite of my real identity, blank, innocuous. I drafted the message with calm precision. Thought you deserved to know what your fiancé is doing in Paris with a married woman. Your wedding planner deserves an update too. I hovered over the send button, mindful of the gravity wrapped in those typed words. Then I pressed it, unleashing a fuse that I imagined would spark a conflagration in Talia's life. I pictured her reading that message, the phone trembling in her hand, her eyes scanning the image as disbelief seized her. I savored the moment before closure. Within minutes, I received an automated reply. Your message could not be delivered. Account locked due to suspicious activity. The pending drama remained unseen on my end, but I felt the aftershock of impact. Then, my phone buzzed again, a message from my personal line, not the burner. Talia, or someone claiming to be her, had reached out. Is this you? Did you send me those photos? I smiled at the straightforward question. This was the candid moment I'd envisioned, a woman confronting her partner's infidelity, armed with irrefutable proof. I tapped out a brief reply. Yes. Your wedding has been jeopardized by Julian's affair. I'm sorry. Then I hit send. I set the phone on the desk and leaned back, steepling my fingers. The rain outside tapped against the windows, muted and rhythmic, matching the pulse of my thoughts. I'd used one burner to freeze Ivy's funds and another to ignite the final betrayal of a man who'd become entwined in her lies. It felt necessary. I thought of Ivy's face as she browsed Instagram, oblivious to the fact that her smiling photos had just been weaponized. A dark satisfaction crept through me, settling beside the raw ache of loss. My phone chimed again, another message from Talia, hurried and fractured across sentences. I can't believe this. Thank you for telling me. You have to delete my number from that account. I don't know what to do. Her confusion and gratitude mirrored my own tangled relief. Part of me regretted the cruelty, but that regret was faint beneath the clarity of action. I typed back, good luck. I've done my part. Then I deleted the conversation, severing that final thread. I shut down my laptop and rose from my chair, muscles tensing and relaxing as adrenaline ebbed. I hadn't gone nuclear on Ivy yet. No, dear mother, no family-wide humiliation. But I'd widened the circle of her fallout. My actions had consequences beyond our marriage, rippling into another woman's world. I turned from the desk and walked toward the living room rug, threads of crossed loyalty tangling at my feet. My reflection in the window caught my eye. I looked tired, haggard, but resolute. I wasn't the man who'd pored over beach postcards for vacation plans, smoking cigars with my father-in-law to bond. I was a man with purpose now, driven by a need to unveil the full truth. I settled onto the sofa, pulling a throw blanket around my shoulders. The room felt vast and empty, the furnishings impersonal without her presence. I reached for my phone again, opened Ivy's message thread, and saw 2 urgent texts waiting. "We're in trouble. Please respond." I stared at them, unmoved. I tapped "Do Not Disturb" and placed the phone face down. She would have to wait. She had no clue the extent of the collapse I'd set in motion. She thought only I knew, but by dragging Julian's fiancée into the fray, the spiral extended beyond the two of them. A distant memory surfaced. Our wedding day, the whisper of silk against ceremony hall chairs, the way Ivy had looked at me as we recited vows. To have and to hold. I'd meant it. I still did, in some fractured way. But vows didn't cover financial duplicity or transatlantic escapades. My feelings were corroded, mangled by deception. I shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of it all. My grip on control didn't feel like victory. It felt like a burden I'd chosen willingly, trading my innocence for certainty. My eyes shifted to the desk, to the unopened email from my lawyer Carson. It sat at the top of my inbox with the subject line, "Let's talk." I reached for my laptop and typed in my password. I needed legal counsel to ensure every action, every freeze, every forwarded photo, every burner message was backed by strategy. I clicked open and scanned Carson's words. "We need to finalize divorce terms, discuss asset division, and file amendments regarding financial misconduct. Can meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. I paused, considering the terse efficiency of his tone. He knew the stakes. I tapped reply and confirmed our appointment. I closed the laptop and returned to the sofa, pulling the blanket tighter. The city lights shimmered through the window, distant stars and a sky no longer visible. I thought of Ivy, stranded somewhere between the Eiffel Tower and the hotel she couldn't afford. She'd opened a door to secrecy, only to walk into a trap of her own making. My actions had exposed her, not out of petty revenge but out of necessity. She had betrayed the foundation of our life together, and I needed her to understand the cost. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and emptied a glass of water in one long gulp. My hands steadied, thoughts quieted. The satisfaction I'd felt earlier now mingled with something more somber, the realization that once trust burns, the ashes linger. I didn't know if I could rebuild anything after this. But for now, I had erected a moment of absolute clarity, where truth stood naked in the spotlight. I rose, turned off the living room lamps, and walked to the front door. Pausing there, I looked back at the empty room, our memories dispersed like echoes in a cavern. I reached for the doorknob and turned it, stepping into the hallway with purposeful strides. My finger hovered over the elevator button as I contemplated the floors between me and rest. I pressed 1, feeling the quiet hum of machinery as I descended. Each floor ticked past, a counter marking the distance between me and the abyss of betrayal. When the doors opened at the lobby, I stepped through, shedding the cloak of my apartment like a discarded skin. Outside, the night air enveloped me. The city's pulse echoed, late dinner crowds, distant sirens, the low rumble of passing trains. I pulled my coat collar up and walked toward the street. I didn't know where I would go, maybe a hotel bar, maybe a sterile motel lounge, but that choice was mine. Ivy had relinquished her claim to home by fleeing into lies. Now, each step I took was an assertion of my own autonomy. The world lay before me, unfamiliar and vast. Betrayal had burned the routine away, leaving an expanse of possibilities and consequences. I inhaled the cool air and exhaled, feeling the truth settle in my lungs. No turning back. I didn't go public. I didn't post a single word on social media. But I did tap open our family group chat, the one Ivy and I shared with her mother, her brother Evan, and her sister Marin. For years, that chat had been a steady hum of birthday reminders, recipe swaps, and photos of nephews taking their first steps. Tonight, it became a courtroom, and I was the prosecutor. I drafted my message carefully, opening with civility. "Mom, Evan, I need your help. Please see the attached." Then I attached screenshots, the forged itinerary showing Paris, the transaction list totaling $75,000, and the Instagram photo of Ivy and Julian tagged at Le Bourget. I added a caption below. Ivy lied about her business trip to Chicago. She and Julian have been traveling on my account for personal pleasure. I thought you should know. My finger hovered over send for a full 5 seconds. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, the anticipation of every family member's reaction. Then I tapped. The messages appeared in sequence. Oh my God. From her mother. What? From Evan. Why would she? From Marin. The calm, Domestic tone evaporated instantly, replaced by incredulity, shock, and a growing fury that radiated through my own phone. I watched as her mother's avatar lit up with a flurry of typing bubbles, each one a hiss of outrage. "Ivy," she wrote, "explain this right now." I didn't reply. I let them stew. Minutes later, the first call came in, Evan. I declined. After that, Marin called. I didn't pick up. Her mother texted, "Please, Ivy, what is going on?" A moment later, another message. "Marcus, are you sure?" I tapped back. "See for yourself." I forwarded one more screenshot. Ivy's apology email from her burner message imploring me to unfreeze her account. "Looks like she knew she was in the wrong," I added. The group chat exploded. Emojis flew, angry faces, broken hearts, shocked gasps. Allegations and questions tumbled in rapid succession. "How long? Where did you even get this? I can't believe she'd try this to you." Beneath it all lay an undercurrent of betrayal from them too. After all, family had been her alibi. "I'm with my mom, brother's wedding next weekend. Don't worry, everyone knows." They'd all unknowingly link credence to her lies. Evan messaged me privately, "I can't believe she used your credit like this. I'll talk to her." His words felt hollow though. She always confided in him first. I wondered if she tried to gaslight him too. I opened my own reply. "Thank you." Then I closed the chat and stepped away from my phone, leaning against the kitchen counter. In the silence, I tasted both relief and sorrow. She tried to isolate me by hiding the truth. Now, the walls she built with her family were crumbling around her. Her network of support had become a powder keg, and I just lit the fuse. I'd given her a moment to explain, but the burden of proof was hers to bear. An hour passed. I returned to the group and saw her mother's final message. "I'm going to call her. We will fix this." The words hung like a threat. I exhaled, knowing this was far from over. The family's intervention would bring new tensions, anger at Ivy for her duplicity, shame that they'd been deceived, and loyalty torn between blood and justice. I closed the chat and muted notifications. I didn't want to watch the fallout in real time. Instead, I moved to the window, looking out at the city lights flickering against the night sky. Their soft glow felt distant now, a reminder that the world continued spinning even as my corner of it shattered. Tomorrow, I would meet with Carson to draw up the papers. But tonight, I stood alone, stripped of the previous certainties. Ivy's betrayal had opened a chasm between us, and her family's knowledge had widened it into a canyon. I placed my hand on the cool glass and pressed my forehead against it, feeling the solidity of the building beneath me. The structure held. I would hold. And when she finally faced her family, ashamed, broken, pleading, she would see that the illusion of safety she'd relied on was gone forever. Trust, once severed, left nothing but the echo of what used to be. Tonight, in the silent aftermath of the chat explosion, I felt both devastation and resolve. Devastation at what was lost, and resolve to rebuild my life on foundations she could never shake again. My phone vibrated with an incoming call from a Paris number I recognized too well. Ivy. For the first time in hours, I felt my chest tighten, not with anger, but with a strange pang of pity. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice measured. "Hello?" Her breath hit the line like a gale, urgent and ragged. "Marcus, please. I made a mistake. I was confused. I need you to get me home." Her words tumbled over each other, each one fragile and pleading. I could almost see her in that hotel lobby, the last vestiges of glamour drained from her face, the lights of the city mocking her from beyond thick glass. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself against the tremor in my fingers. This was the moment I had been building toward, the moment her panic collided with my resolve. I didn't interrupt her. I let her confession wash over me in a flood of regret and desperation. When she finally paused, as if waiting for absolution, I said, "Ivy, I've already canceled your return ticket." My tone was flat, an implacable judge delivering a sentence. I heard her inhale sharply, the line of her panic audible across the ocean. "What? You can't," she stammered, but I cut her off before she could beg further. I checked every flight. "The only one available is standby on the 6 a.m. to New York. You'll need to pay for it yourself." There was no spite in my voice, only a calm clarity that made each syllable land like a hammer. I pictured her shoulders slumping, the weight of her actions crushing her as reality settled in. I paused to let the silence stretch, to give her time to feel the full impact of my words. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, tinged with humiliation. "I don't have the money," she whispered. That single admission carried the full force of her betrayal. She'd spent every cent, leaving herself bankrupt, financially and morally. I closed my eyes, recalling the taste of her lies and the warmth of her once trusted touch. Guilt flickered at the edges of my resolve, but I quelled it with a deliberate breath. "Then you'll stay in Paris," I said quietly, "until you can arrange payment." My words hung between us, unwavering. She gasped, a sound so fragile it broke something inside me. "Please, Marcus," she began, voice cracking, "I'll do anything. Just get me home." The desperation in her plea was raw, like exposed nerve endings searching for relief. I let the word anything echo in my mind before responding. "I've sent your belongings to storage. You'll need to retrieve them when you return. Speak to my lawyer going forward. The divorce papers are ready." Each phrase was precise, a scalpel severing the last ties that bound us. Her response was a long, frantic rush of words, promises, apologies, explanations about confusion and regret. She begged for forgiveness, for a second chance, for any shred of mercy. I didn't respond. I held the phone aloft, listening to her confession like a dirge, and when her monologue faltered, I said only, "Goodbye, Ivy." Then I ended the call and set my phone on silent. The apartment felt unnaturally still, as though it, too, paused to absorb the gravity of her words. I stared at the phone's dark screen, its silence a mirror of the chasm she had created. I walked to the window and looked down at the streetlights, their glow soft and unjudging. The night carried on, taxis rolled by, pedestrians chatted on sidewalks, shops stayed open late. The world beyond my glass bubble was indifferent to our collapse. I placed my hand against the cool pane, feeling a hollow ache where trust had once lived. Ivy's shame call had been her confession and her surrender, but it had also been the final step in my own awakening. I felt neither triumph nor relief, only an empty clarity that the life we had built together was irrevocably broken. After a long moment, I turned away and retrieved the email notification still glowing on my desk, divorce papers attached. I clicked it open, scanning the subject line without urgency. The document awaited my review, a legal blueprint for dismantling what remained of our shared existence. I downloaded it and saved it in its own folder, labeled Closure. I considered replying to Carson Reed to confirm next steps, but I paused, choosing reflection over action. I sat in the dim light, letting the finality of Ivy's shame call settle like dust in the air. Outside, the city shivered under a gentle rain, each drop tracing patterns on the pavement. In that quiet, I realized something profound. Betrayal had fractured us, but it had also freed me from the illusions I had once clung to. Ivy's apology meant nothing if it came at the cost of my dignity. I rose and walked to my bedroom, retrieving the framed photograph of us beneath the Eiffel Tower, a relic of happier days. I stared at it a moment, fingertips tracing the glass, then turned it face down on my nightstand. No longer a memento, it was a relic of what once was and a reminder of what I would not allow to define me going forward. I lay down, closed my eyes, and let sleep come, unburdened by the weight of lies. Ivy's call of shame had marked the end of our chapter together, and though the road ahead was uncertain, I finally felt the faint stirrings of peace. Betrayal had burned, but in its embers lay the possibility of renewal, and in that possibility, I found my strength. I met with Carson Reed on Friday morning, the sun still low enough to cast long shadows through his corner office. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing smile, as though he already understood the gravity of what I'd uncovered. I slid the folder of documentation across his polished mahogany desk, bank statements, airline itineraries, text message transcripts, screenshots from Ivy's social media. Carson flipped through them with clinical detachment, nodding. "Financial betrayal," he said, his tone dry. "Infidelity. That's a strong foundation for divorce. We'll leverage this." Hearing the words out loud crystallized my purpose. What had felt like righteous anger now became a legal strategy. I wasn't simply hurt. I was invoking consequences. We spent the next hour itemizing every charge, the $30,000 on airfare, the hotel stays, the private car services, and the helicopter tour Ivy had tried to book at the last minute. Carson made notes, pausing occasionally to ask questions. "Were the joint account withdrawals authorized by both of you? Have you documented any communication about repayment?" I answered each precisely, recalling every evasive text, every half-truth she'd offered about business trips and client dinners. When I mentioned the car title, he raised an eyebrow. "Clever. By holding that lien in your name, you've secured more leverage." I felt a flicker of pride, painful as it was. My actions had been methodical, not rash. Carson then turned to the question of asset division. He outlined the process: seizure of funds, reimbursement for unauthorized spending, and allocation of joint property. He explained that Ivy's access to our shared investments could be suspended pending resolution, and that her own assets, if she had any outside our marriage, would be scrutinized. I shivered at the thought of prying into her finances, but I reminded myself that trust had to be mutual. What about alimony? I asked quietly. Carson's answer was pragmatic. Given her misconduct, we can argue for minimal or even no spousal support. You'll file an affidavit detailing the financial abuse. His language was devoid of emotion, but I sensed his approval of my firm stance. Toward the end of our meeting, Carson smiled and slid a draft of the petition across the desk. Its pages outlined charges of infidelity and economic fraud, terms I'd never imagined pairing, but which fit our situation perfectly. He underlined sections where we'd request temporary custody of the marital home and exclusive use of our primary vehicle. This is your leverage, he said. It ensures she can't simply walk back into your life unannounced. I glanced down at the printed document, the ink stark against the page, and felt the surreal weight of it, legal text transforming personal betrayal into formal accusations. I signed where he directed me, my pen scratching decisively. There was no turning back. As I exited Carson's office, I felt both unburdened and unsettled. The city outside pulsed with life, commuters rushing, cafes serving morning coffee, yet I carried with me the legal machinery set in motion to dismantle my marriage. I walked to a nearby cafe and ordered a black coffee, my hand steady. I reviewed my phone, a message from Talia, the woman Julian had nearly married, thanking me again for exposing him. She wrote that she was finalizing her own divorce proceedings. In a strange way, we were allies in this aftermath of deceit, our respective betrayals intertwined. I responded simply, "Stay strong," then closed the app. The solidarity felt oddly comforting. Later that afternoon, I returned home to find a voicemail from Ivy's mother. Her voice trembled. "Marcus, darling, I never imagined she'd stoop to this. Please, would you meet me tomorrow? I want to understand everything." I listened to the message twice before deleting it. I wasn't ready to face her family, not yet. I needed time to process, to rebuild the solidity of my own life before confronting theirs. Instead, I sent a brief text, "Let's talk next week." Then I powered down my phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment, letting the sunlight pool on the floor. Betrayal had rewritten the ledger of my life, but I was the one holding the pen now, and I intended to write the final chapters on my terms. I arrived home that morning with a quiet sense of finality. The air in the hallway felt cooler than usual, as though the building itself had judged the rupture between us and lowered its thermostat in solidarity. I pressed the key fob, and the door blinked its red refusal. My chest tightened for a moment, then I remembered. I had changed the locks. It was my final declaration of sovereignty over a life she had trespassed. I retrieved the new key from my pocket, a small bronze token of authority, and slipped into the apartment. Inside, the rooms lay empty of her warmth, but still suffused with echoes, her scent lingering on the curtains, the soft drop of sunlight across the floor that once caught her hair in its glow. None of it felt like home anymore. It felt like a mausoleum for what we had lost. On the dining table sat a single manila envelope addressed in her handwriting, "Marcus." My name curved across the paper with the flourish she once used for love letters. I placed the envelope before me and lifted the flap. Inside lay the storage unit receipt and a slip of paper. "You said you were going for business. This is just that business. No forwarding address." The words cut sharper than any knife, smooth and practiced, yet hollow. I felt the last tether fray as I read them. She had packaged her belongings into sterile cardboard boxes, removed their shared history, and left without a trace. No apology, no plea, only the final sting of her note. I sat heavily in the chair and unfolded the slip again, memorizing the cadence of her farewell. Business. A single word that had once conjured ambition and partnership, now twisted into irony. She had treated our marriage like a corporate venture, complete with expense reports and boarding passes, and now she filed her departure like a severed contract. I closed my eyes, tasting the bitter residue of her betrayal on my tongue, and let the silence settle around me. I rose and grabbed the storage receipt, punching the code into my phone to locate her unit. The address flashed on the screen. A self-storage facility on the edge of town, its drab metal doors numbered in dull gray. I considered going that moment, to see her boxes waiting in the gloom, but I hesitated. Why would I watch her possessions lie dormant while she disappeared into some new chapter? Instead, I sat back down and let the stillness envelop me. The tangible pieces of her life were boxed and stored. The woman herself was adrift beyond my reach. It was her choice. Mine was to reclaim what remained, my peace. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Carson Reed. She's left a note and storage receipt. No forwarding address. Please proceed with filing. I hit send and closed the computer. The click of the lid felt sonic in the hush of the apartment. The legal machinery I'd set in motion would now advance without any hope of reconciliation. The divorce petition would carry her absence like evidence, and I would walk through the process with the authority of a man who had burned every bridge she could have used to return. I walked through each room, pausing where her belongings had once been. In the bedroom, the wardrobe stood empty, hangers clicking softly as if to mock the void. I reached out and ran my fingers along the closet rod, feeling the cool metal beneath my skin. No more her dresses, no more casual jackets, only the echo of their absence. I moved into the living room, where the sofa faced the window that once framed our shared horizon. Now I would sit here alone, a solitary silhouette against the skyline. I imagined Ivy's headless boxes stacked in a dusty corridor somewhere, waiting for a name that would never call. As I turned off the lights, I felt the apartment exhale, a final breath that shook the walls with the weight of goodbye. I left the envelope on the table and stepped into the hallway. The new lock clicked behind me, sealing the door against her return. I felt both constriction and relief, as if I had shut the lid on a coffin, but also liberated the spirit trapped inside. The corridor stretched before me, a neutral space between past and future. I walked down the stairs, two at a time, until I reached the lobby's automatic doors. Outside, the city pulsed with life indifferent to my personal exile. I inhaled deeply, the crisp air filling lungs cleansed of betrayal. My steps were unhurried as I moved away from the building, my home relinquished back to me without qualifiers. I was free from the illusions she had spun, free from the financial entanglements and fabrications. The ledger of our lives had been rewritten, every unauthorized charge reversed, every lie exposed, every promise broken. And now, the only address that mattered was mine, a place of sober clarity, where trust would be rebuilt from the ground up. I paused at the curb and looked back at the tower where we once shared our future. It gleamed softly in the morning light, oblivious to the ruins within. I straightened my shoulders and turned away. No forwarding address meant no return. I took a single step forward, and then another. Each one a quiet affirmation that in the aftermath of betrayal, I would forge a new path, unencumbered, resolute, and wholly